I am back. This is genuinely the first time I've been alone in my house since, when was the last time I made a video? Like August. So I missed out on doing both my August and September wraps at the time when they were actually relevant. So I'm just going to combine the two together and do them now, and hopefully I can remember what the books were about that I read. First up, in August, I finished off reading his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman in preparation for the Book of Dust, which I believe is out now. It's my birthday next month, so I'm not allowed to buy any books right now, so I'm gonna have to wait until November to read that book probably. I probably didn't enjoy these ones as much as the first book. They're still really good. I feel like the second book, The Subtle Knife, is less of a novel and more of a bridge between the first book and the second book. It definitely helps to shift the tone so you're prepared for the contents of this book. This one, a lot of exciting stuff goes down, and there's a lot of science and obviously more religious allegory that I got a lot more reading it this time round than I did reading it when I was a teenager. I did find the ending very fast and a little bit anticlimactic. I'm not sure I entirely understood the reasonings why what Lyra and Will did solved everything that was going on. I potentially will have to read this series again to fully get everything that Philip Pullman's trying to say. I also think Philip Pullman relies quite heavily on stereotypes for his characters. For example, Mrs. Coulter, a lot of the stuff that she does in this book is done purely because she's a mother and she suddenly has these maternal feelings, and I just didn't buy that. However, I still really do enjoy these books, and I'm definitely very excited to see what Philip Pullman has added to the universe, especially because this new book is written so many years later, so he's probably had a lot of new ideas and thoughts about the themes that he addresses in this series. Second up, I read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This has been on my to-read list for a very long time. The story is about Guy Montag, who is a fireman who burns books for a living. Although the book is most famous for the book burning, it's actually more about a society where intellectualism is seen as a bad thing, because to be intellectual is to think about things, and to think about things is to be unhappy. So in this world, everyone just plays sport and drives fast cars and watches TV because that surface level type stuff makes everybody very happy. I really liked a lot of the themes in this book. Unfortunately, I found the writing style very clunky, but there are a lot of really interesting gems that I gleaned out of that story. For example, the idea that books aren't necessarily important in themselves, but they're important to the human experience. So there's a line from one of the characters that says, we can't experience everything in the world and we can't be everybody in the world, but through books we can experience things that we would never get to experience in our everyday lives. There was also an interesting idea about the human race will always go through these self-destructive cycles, and that the, I guess, rebels in this universe see the current society as just the low point of that cycle, and that eventually things will go back to a relative normality. The third book I read in August was actually non-fiction for a change, and it was Costume and Fashion, A Concise History by James Laver. I'm really interested in clothes and fashion, but specifically why fashions are created in reference to the society that they were created in. So for example, learning about why there were suddenly massive skirts in the Victorian era, and in Jane Austen time, why waist suddenly became empire waists and everyone stopped wearing corsets. This book spanned from the first human-made clothes to fashion in 2000. It was written in 1969, and then there was an added bonus chapter for the years leading up to 2000 that was added on. So the writing style is quite old-fashioned, and the guy who's written the book presents a lot of opinions on the fashions and often calls out for ones that he thinks are particularly shit. The book has lots of photos, which is awesome, so you can actually see what the fashions look like that are being discussed. But I found this book a bit too descriptive. It kind of just went through each era and described what people were wearing, and I wanted to learn more about the history of why people were wearing those things. The next book I read is probably one of my favourite of the year so far, and it is The Underground Railroad. Oh, that's hard to say. It's The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is actually my first 5-star fiction book of the year. The story is about a slave girl called Cora living in America before the Civil War, and it reimagines the Underground Railroad, which was a system set up to help slaves escape. So it imagines it as an actual real underground railroad helping slaves escape from state to state. I think this was really clever of the author to create this imaginary railroad, because it meant that his character could go from state to state with relative ease, and it meant he could discuss the different ways that black people were mistreated during that era. It starts off with what we think of as slavery, slaves working on cotton farms in Georgia, and then Cora escapes with a friend to the nearby state, I think it was South Louisiana, and there she's given a job, she's given a house and a wage and clean clothes to wear, and seemingly treated well, but she eventually finds out that all the so-called medical treatments that some of the black people are having, they've actually been given syphilis and are being experimented on by white doctors to try and cure syphilis. Cora herself also gets given a job in a museum where she is actually an exhibit and has to stand in a variety of exhibits that show the life of a slave. I really like the way the book is written. It's very matter of fact because the horrible things that happen to Cora just speak for themselves. I really like how the author goes into a lot of different ideas around America. The idea that it's this land of opportunity where everyone can come from anywhere in the world and do well and find a home, and showing that this country was built off slavery and off the torture of its native people. This book was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize, and I'm really sad that it didn't make the shortlist because I think it should have won. It was a really amazing book and I highly recommend everyone read it. The last book I read in August was Station 11 by Emily St. Mandel John. No, that's not how you say her name. Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This has got a lot of rave reviews. I unfortunately did not really enjoy it. I found that it was like reading two books at the same time. So at the beginning you've got an elderly actor in a production of King Lear. He has a heart attack on stage, and just after he dies, a flu breaks out that kills most of the world's population. So you've got these two sides to the story. You've got the before the flu happened, which talks about the life of the actor and all the people around him, and then you've got the after the flu happened, which follows this band of actors who are acting out Shakespeare in the various towns that they come across. I definitely found the before the flu story much more compelling than the after the flu story, especially the character of Miranda. I felt she was really well drawn, and there were some excellent scenes with her where I really felt drawn right into the story. The after the flu bits felt a little bit gimmicky in a way. I didn't feel like I was getting a new perspective on an apocalyptic world, and the characters felt very wooden. There were also a lot of coincidences in that section of the book where characters who were related to the actor kind of just happened to meet each other, and that kind of took me out of the story. On to September. In September, the first book I read was Monkey Grip by Helen Garner. This is a cult classic Australian novel written in the 70s. It's about a lady called Nora. She lives among a bunch of drug takers and hippies in Melbourne in the 70s. The book follows about a year of her life, falling in love with various people and sleeping with them a lot, and taking lots of drugs and drinking a lot as well. And she has a child that amazingly doesn't seem to be harmed by any of the things that she's experiencing. I thought the writing could at times be absolutely incredible, and Helen Garner is amazingly apt at just capturing people and moments with very few words. However, it was incredibly repetitive. It could have been easily half the length and still been too long, and I found the characters very boring. The main character Nora was obsessed with a guy who was just so obviously selfish and awful, and he reminded me of someone I knew at uni actually, which made it worse. Next book I read in September was Exit West by Hamid. Mohsin. This is about Saeed and Nadia. They live in an unnamed war-torn country in the Middle East. It chronicles them escaping from that country via a series of mysterious doors that have opened all around the world, letting refugees travel with great ease from one end of the world to the other. It's a very similar concept to the Underground Railroad in that the author just got rid of the tricky part of moving his characters from one country to another by creating these magical doors. This also allowed him to discuss ideas around refugees not being welcome in other countries. For example, Saeed and Nadia go to Britain and people start getting overly patriotic about their country and wanting the refugees out. It also talks about how even though Saeed and Nadia are able to go to a safe place where they won't be bombed or killed by militants, they still can't be happy because they've been forced to leave a home that they wanted to stay in, and they don't feel welcome in their new home. It was a lesser life for them, having to go from high up jobs in the country that they came from to being seen as poor and uneducated in this other country. I thought the beginning was really strong. The writing was really well done at the beginning, where he would describe characters that Saeed and Nadia knew, and then in the next sentence describe how they were killed by the militants, really bringing to life how awful it is for people in war-torn countries. However, despite it being a short book, I thought it got a bit repetitive, and I found Saeed and Nadia not fully fleshed out characters. The next book I read was The Virgin Suicides by Jeffery Eugenides. I read this because the Banging Book Club read this as their book in September. I'd already seen the film and I thought it was okay, but kind of creepy. I'm not sure I like the book anymore, really. I understand that it's meant to be a book about American society and the Lisbon girls in the book, who are the virgin suicides, as mentioned, though not necessarily virgins. Their slow demise and death is meant to be a metaphor for the corruption of America, and it's not about the girls at all, but about the men who are obsessed with them. However, I just wanted to know more about the girls themselves. I wanted to be in their heads. I wanted to find out their point of view, because they were by far the most interesting people in this book. This book is mainly known for having really beautiful writing, and to be honest, I didn't think the writing was that great. It was definitely a bunch of metaphors, and I found it quite forced at times. It didn't flow naturally like you want a book to. And that was apparently the last book I read in September. Let me know if you've read any of those books and what you thought of them, and definitely all go read The Underground Railroad. This month I am doing a Halloween themed reading month, so hopefully I will be alone again in my house soon, and I will be able to get that up before Halloween, or at least on Halloween. I hope you're having a great day, and I will see you soon, hopefully. Bye!